Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad.
And so this is episode 3. We've got some things coming up. What we're driving, what Tesla owners understand about Autopilot, Mazda CX-5 is getting a diesel, Jaguar iPace because of LA, and then you have the interview with that guy from Chariot, whose name we were just talking about this.
Ali Vahabzadeh. He's the CEO of Chariot, which is a San Francisco-based company that was purchased by Ford's Smart Mobility division about a little more than a month ago. And I had a chance to sit down with Ali at the Los Angeles Auto Show, and I think you'll enjoy the interview.
So that's all coming up. We'll get to it. First thing we're going to do is the garage. And so, Sam, what are you driving?
I've been also driving a Mazda 3 hatchback for about a month and a half now, part of a longer-term loan that Mazda is doing with some analysts. And the Mazda, I think of all the current mainstream brands, I think, Mazda's car lineup is generally one of the ones I like the best. The 3 in particular among compact cars is just a fantastic car in so many ways. I mean, excuse me. I love the Mazda's current Kodo design language. What they've done with that. It's definitely a more grown-up look than their previous generation designs of the latter part of the last decade. That always seem to have a giant smiley face.
I was going to say the super happy face.
Yes. This one is it's a more sophisticated look. And one of the things that I like about it in particular is how they've moved the A-pillars back. And even though these are front-wheel drive vehicles, they have the proportions of a rear-drive vehicle when you look at them in profile. It just gives it a more sporty look that's really in keeping with Mazda's kind of overall theme of driving matters. And just the sophistication of this car is really impressive. The interior is really well executed. It's not super fancy, but it just looks really good, very clean, uncluttered. And I also like the fact that Mazda on all their current generation vehicles uses a central control knob down on the center console for navigating around the infotainment system. Which personally I find is my preferred method for navigating those systems when I'm driving. I can get around a lot quicker and with a lot more precision than I can on a touchscreen. Although the screen in the 3 is actually a touchscreen as well, so you can do it either way. But it's a little bit longer reach because it's up on top of the dash, so it's closer to your line of sight when you're driving, so you don't have to look down as much to see the nav screen and things like that. But it's just a really well executed car. It drives really well. In the past I've driven the manual transmission versions of both the 2-liter and the 2.5 liter engines, and this particular one is a 2.5 liter automatic. It's just got such a great balance of supple ride and great driving dynamics.
Yeah. So why do you think that the 3 kind of has this problem of like catching on? Everybody, I mean, I love it. Everybody who drives it tends to really like it, and yet it's like some tiny fraction of market share.
I wish I knew. I think I think the key is just to get people to actually try them out, to get them to pay attention. It's like, hey, Mazda still exists and they're making some really great cars. The 6 is a fabulous midsize sedan. The 3, is one of the best compacts out there. I'd put it right up there. The 3 and the new Civic hatch are probably the class of the field right now. The Chevy Cruze is really good as well. There's not really any bad cars in the segment anymore, but I just something about the 3 really appeals to me.
Yeah, and you said it's a hatch, right? This one's a hatch?
This one's a hatch. You can also get it as a 4-door sedan, but frankly, I just don't understand why anybody buys compact sedans. If you're going to have a compact, get the hatchback, so you've got that extra flexibility. When you find something cool as you're driving around at yard sales, or if you want to go camping or whatever, you can pop the back seat down. You've got a big cargo area back there. Regardless of what brand you buy, I just prefer hatchbacks for smaller cars.
Oh, and they're so much more flexible in your fitting your lifestyle. They're it's kind of the reason why crossovers are so popular. I think that they take that same kind of utility, and they're a little larger and they're a slightly different image, but overall the general utility is there. It's a tiny little hatchback or a tiny little station wagon.
Yeah, and that's what crossover, really modern crossovers that are based on front wheel drive platforms like this, like the CX-5 or the CX-3, really are not little more than the hatchback version of the car platform they share, just sitting with a higher ride height, and sometimes, and usually all-wheel drive is an option, which often is not an option on the car version.
So what trim level does this 3 have? Is it like the premium one that's got all the fanciness, or is it sort of middle of the road?
This is the 3S Grand Touring.
Nice.
So it's got the leather seating and the navigation and basically everything. And this one's about $26,500, which is it's not cheap, but it's not it's still fairly affordable. And
that's a pretty great deal for something that
it certainly is. Compared to anything else in the segment, comparably equipped, it's competitively priced, and since it is a Mazda, and as you said, people don't seem to be clamoring for them. You can actually get some pretty good deals on them. So I think it's definitely something that everybody should be taking a look at as an alternative to whatever else is out there, and especially if you're if like many people you're not fond of CVTs, continuously variable transmissions. Mazda is continuing to use 6-speed torque converter automatics, traditional automatics, but just very efficient. And that's the other thing about Mazda's cars, is they are very fuel efficient.
Well, that was what I was going to ask, is what you're getting for fuel economy with it.
We're doing about 33 miles per gallon combined.
And that's with the 2.5, so that's like 180 something horsepower.
Yeah,
which is,
if you go with the 2-liter, you can get 2 or 3 miles per gallon more. You lose a little bit of performance. It's still not bad at all. It's about 155 horsepower with the 2-liter.
That's kind of plenty.
Engines, both engines are direct injected. So they're just fun to drive. They have great steering feel. Just everything about it. If you actually enjoy driving, and you have some curves in between where you are and wherever you need to be, you're gonna have a hard time having more fun in a mainstream car than you will in a Mazda. To have something that drives better than this, you've got to step up to the performance versions of competitive cars like VW GTI or Focus ST or a Civic Si.
Yeah, well, and even the automatic was one of the things that I found actually really surprising about the 3. Mazda does the automatic a little different than other manufacturers with their Skyactiv sort of ethos. They really it has a larger lockup clutch in it, and so it's locked up, physically connected to the wheels much more often than some other torque converter automatics. So it feels really, really solid and responsive, and that's one of the things that helps it get a lot more efficiency. And it's surprising how good an automatic equipped car is to drive, to the point where I might suggest the auto over the manual. I haven't driven either in a while, but the last few manual transmission cars I've driven that have been just like straight up, normal commuter cars, they've done a lot of like fiddling with the throttle for me, as if like, hey, we know you don't really know how to drive one of these, so we're going to put it in the software. And that, like, I wound up fighting the car, and that's really aggravating.
Well, the Mazda 3 manual, it's a very slick shifting manual transmission, and they don't really seem to do anything fancy like that with the throttle. It's just, just does what you expect it to do.
Yeah.
Which, as a driver, that's what you want.
Yeah, that and like clutch delay valves and stuff. Like there's stuff out there to apparently save us from ourselves, which, yeah, I kind of don't need. And with the smaller engine too, the 2-liter with the auto, like that's a pretty good combo. Mm-hmm. You get the torque multiplication off the line, you get the extra miles per gallon on the highway. It's a really good car, and I feel like, for me, comparing it to the Golf, the Mazda seems a little bit more elemental, a little bit less isolated, I guess, than the Golf. And the Golf is sort of my benchmark for that class, because it's an overall refined, very good car. And the Focus is pretty good as well, but the Golf is really still in my mind like the class of the field. But the Mazda's right there in terms of being fun to drive. It feels different in a way that's still good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What you got?
Yeah, I was gonna say, so we're sticking with basically the compact class. I have a Beetle Dune, Volkswagen Beetle Dune, which is basically false promises.
You mean it looks like something that should be a dune buggy, but maybe it doesn't quite live up to that?
Yeah, I mean, it looks great. I love the way it looks. This one is the 3 colors are offered as this RNG color that I've got. I think red, white, and silver or something. This is the nicest looking of the Beetle Dunes, just because it has a color that stands out. It's got a nice little fin spoiler on the back, and stripe package. The ride height is up a little bit, and it's got its own bumpers and moldings. So it's handsome. It looks like it should perform like a little mini 911 or something, which it doesn't. It performs like a Golf with the 1.8T, which is plenty fine. This one has the automatic, so it's a decent car, and I think all the Beetle Dunes are actually automatic only.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's the only one they offer.
Yeah, it's a decent value if you want something that's a little bit sort of cheeky, a little bit distinctive. It's larger than a Fiat 500. It's not as overdone as a Mini, so it certainly has a place. But of course, you could just get a Golf, and in doing that, you'd get a manual. You'd get more utility. If you got a GTI, if style is still your thing, you'd get much better performance. And it's only a few more bucks a month. When you price this out, the Beetle Dune winds up at about $24,000. You can stretch to that 26, 27 of a GTI, a base GTI, and get there pretty easily. And I'm pretty sure Volkswagen dealers are looking to deal.
You think?
Yeah. But it's a triumph of sort of styling and packaging, and there's nothing wrong with that, I guess. Like I didn't know exactly how to feel about it. Because on its surface it's just an appearance package. But there's nothing really wrong with that either, I guess, because that's sort of why we have so many different cars. So it's another choice, and it doesn't really offer you any more substance than you can get in a regular Beetle, but it offers it in a slightly different package. So I don't know, maybe talk me off the ledge that I shouldn't be negative about that. I should just celebrate the choice. Yeah,
I mean, there's nothing wrong with having some choice. And depending on what your lifestyle is, if you don't have young kids, if you don't have kids that you have to try and get into the back seat, a car like this is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, if you like the style, go for it. I think the name and kind of what they've done with the design kind of implies that this thing has some off-road capabilities that it clearly doesn't.
Yes, that's for sure.
But aside from that, but even so-called crossovers, most utility vehicles don't have real off-road capabilities anyway, and those look even more, they're even more jacked up. So it's, if you like the look of this thing, go for it. I'm not, there's no reason for us to stop you. And like I said, if it fits your lifestyle, there's nothing wrong with going for a particular look that appeals to you. If you like this better than a Golf or a Jetta, or anything else in the class, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly pleasant to drive. Dynamically, it's pretty good because it's a Volkswagen small car.
Yeah, I mean, it's a VW, which, I mean, for all of the issues that we've had with VW over the years with reliability and emissions and so on, the one thing that they have consistently gotten right is the driving dynamics. For many years, and I mean, that's the reason why we're on our second one in the last dozen years, at least for now anyway. So, it's the way it drives. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, and it's, finally has USB in it too. I think this is the first year that Volkswagen has actually put the ports in.
Yeah, the 2016 models, they finally switched over from having a proprietary port that you'd have to get an adapter cable from the VW dealer to plug in either an Apple Lightning connector or a USB connector. Now they've got standard USB ports built into the car. And does this one have the Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support?
I'm pretty sure it does. My phone doesn't support Android Auto,
okay.
which I'm a little annoyed by. But yes, I'm pretty sure it does. It has the fancy head unit, the MD whatever, which is, it's decent. It's not the class of, the field. It's not as easy to use as the Mazda system, for instance. But Volkswagen's come quite a ways with their infotainment. The screen's still a little bit small, and it has a nice feature where you can set it to shut off after 10 seconds. So, like, for night driving, because I did find that I couldn't get the instruments dark enough. I couldn't get the screen dark enough. So this 10-second timeout actually shuts the screen off until you need it. But it still leaves that little bit of illumination because it's an LCD, and so depending on how you do the LCDs, they have
a little bit of light through.
Yeah, and my Jeep is the same way. If I shut the screen off, it's still sort of like very dimly gray there, and so it still catches your eye a little bit. So,
Does it switch to like a dark theme at nighttime, or is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You know what? I don't know off the top of my head. I'm very persnickety about this stuff. I will get in the car and I will actually switch them even in the daytime. I'll generally force them into night mode and dim them as much as possible.
Dan Roth, persnickety.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's hard to believe.
Yeah, I mean that is one thing about, like, for example, Apple CarPlay. They don't have a distinguishing day or night theme. It's just always fairly dark. It's a predominantly black theme. And then Android Auto, it will switch, based on the headlight position or whatever. It'll switch to a night theme, which is a darker theme. So instead of a lot of bright whites, you have dark grays instead.
So I mean, I feel like that's sort of the way that automakers kind of should be going, is the Android Auto, Apple CarPlay route. And I say that because I just did a run yesterday. I actually took the Crown Vic because I had to pick up some relatives from the airport, and I didn't want to shove them into the Beetle. But that car, it's got its original head unit. It has a tape deck. So I wanted the nav system. So I just, I had my phone. I just sort of rested it there on the ashtray, because the car has an ashtray still. But it has all the functions of an infotainment system, and it's in my phone, and it worked fine. It has, the display's not as big as like the 8-inch screen you get in some cars, but automakers, you can offer that functionality without developing the system on your own. I'm sure you lose some of the robustness in terms of like, how often it may crash or something like that, and some of the sensors for dead reckoning, but why spend the money to develop a system, especially for a car that's going to sell in the $20,000 range? Between $15,000 and $20,000, like that's a lot of money to develop an infotainment system when everybody has one already?
Well, that's a topic that I think I've got a lot of things to say about that, and I've spoken at length about that. But I think we should probably maybe come back to that one next week.
Okay.
Talk about infotainment systems in general, because we've got a lot of other areas to cover tonight. Let's put that one down on the list for next week to talk about, because there are some things about that I've written about it and talked about it in the past, and I've got more stuff to say on that topic.
All right, well, we'll tee that up for next week. And before we get to our main topics, people have asked me, and my answer is no, but have you watched the Grand Tour?
I did watch the first episode the other night. I did. Okay,
so is it worth watching?
If you liked Top Gear with May, Clarkson, and Hammond, you will enjoy this. I mean, it's basically Top Gear, with new stings and new names for the various segments, but it's basically what you would expect. There's nothing dramatically different. If you were a Top Gear fan prior to the most recent season that aired, you will enjoy this.
All right, because I was on the fence about whether I should bother or not. Sounds like I'll check it out. All right, and
as always, there's lots of great cinematography, and it's up to you whether you like the banter between those three. It was enjoyable.
All right, so you're gonna watch episode 2 then? Is basically what you're saying.
Sure, why not? I'm paying for Amazon Prime anyway. I might as well.
Yeah, exactly. All right, and you were out at LA, and we've got a couple of other hits from that as well. But the Chevrolet Bolt was Green Car of the Year. Seems like it was a very thin field for Green Car of the Year, and I know that's one of the beats that you kind of watch is the green car stuff. So, like, where do you come down on that? Is it sort of like, well, that was the default choice, or a solid choice overall?
I mean, both. I mean, it was pretty much the default choice this year. I mean, it's hard to pick anything else over the Bolt this year as the top green car, and generally as one of the most significant cars of the year, period, which is also why Motor Trend picked it as their car of the year. And I think we'll, over the next month or two, we'll be seeing the Bolt collecting a whole bunch of awards from various publications and outlets. It was also named one of the 3 finalists for North American Car of the Year. I think Car and Driver, did they put out their 10 best yet?
10 best has been announced, but I don't think the issue is out yet.
Okay, but it'll be popping up everywhere. It'll have a big shelf full of awards, and now it's just a question of GM actually delivering the cars to customers and seeing how the customers take to it and whether they start flocking to this thing. Because I have yet to actually get behind the wheel of a Bolt. I have sat in one at the auto show a couple of times. It's a remarkably roomy car for its footprint size, and I think from everything I've heard from everyone who's actually driven it so far, it drives really well. It feels surprisingly quick. It handles really well, as most cars with 1,000 pounds of battery in the floor pan will tend to do. It's got all that utility because it's a tall hatch. You've got a lot of cargo space in the back. Even with the back seat up, it's still got I think 17 cubic feet of cargo space behind the back seat, and then when you fold the back seat down, that jumps to close to 50 cubic feet.
That's pretty good for something that's small.
I mean, it's got tremendous utility that you're not going to get out of a certain other $35,000 EV next year or someday.
Right, if it ever arrives next year. I mean, that's the thing. Like, GM, first of all, GM knows it can't screw it up.
Right.
And GM's not going to screw it up because they have the resources. They have other profitable vehicle lines, so they can sort of take a little bit of a loss here and there. They can move some money around, and they're not going to lose their shirts on a single product like this. So I feel like GM's people are really, really good. Their ride and handling of pretty much everything they make has gotten so good in the last 5 to 7 years. The fundamental car is there. And I think this is going to be big for EVs. It's affordable. It's the right size. It's from a manufacturer that's everywhere. There's no hoops to jump through to actually buy one in your state.
Yeah,
kind of stuff. So
I guess initial deliveries are being focused on dealers in California and Oregon over the next couple of months, but they will, early in 2017 they'll be expanding it throughout the 50 states and elsewhere. And so you'll be able to go to any dealer and order one and pick it up and take it there for service. So unlike Tesla, which only has stores in about half of the states, you will be able to pick it up and get it serviced anywhere and get it serviced as quickly as any other GM vehicle. And that's, again, that's something we can come back to as far as Tesla. And there's been increasing complaints from existing customers, even with much lower volumes, of long wait times for service. Waiting a couple of weeks to get fairly basic things serviced, and that should not be a problem with the Bolt. You'll be able to get it serviced anywhere.
Yeah, well, Tesla's gonna. I wish them the best. I'm actually really rooting for them. I think that they've done a lot of great things to change up the automotive world. They're learning the hard lessons of scaling an automaker, though.
Oh yeah, and without Tesla, the Bolt would not exist.
Absolutely true.
And neither would another of the cars that I saw in LA that the world saw for the first time, the Jaguar I-Pace.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about the I-Pace. Let's pivot. So, because for me, that's another car that I'm not quite sure what to think. It's an electric SUV from Jaguar. Okay.
Yeah, it's Jaguar's. It'll be Jaguar's second SUV, and despite the name, with the Pace in the name, it actually shares nothing with the current F-Pace. This is a completely different platform. Everything about it. This is a dedicated electric vehicle platform, and Jaguar has also said this week that by 2020, half of their model lineup will be available in pure electric models. So most likely we can expect to see the new XJ, which is probably coming next year, available as an all-electric version, and then probably the XF or either the XF or XE following that within the next couple of years. But yeah, this is it in many ways it's very similar to what Tesla has done in terms of the basic architecture, and in fact the basic concept of the architecture goes back to stuff that was done at GM back early in the 2000s with their autonomy concept.
A little
the skateboard concept, yeah. So all of the batteries are located in a pack mounted in the floor pan, so it's a structural part of the car, and then electric motors at the front and rear axles for all-wheel drive, 200 horsepower motors at each end, so it's not quite as powerful as a Model X, but frankly, to my eye and to the eyes of pretty much everyone I talked to out in LA this week, it's definitely a more attractive car than the Model X. Doesn't have Falcon Wing doors, which I think
that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, it's not a great loss, I think. And it won't be a 7-seater, or at least not as it's configured right now. It's only a 5-seater. But again, the third row in the Model X is not particularly roomy anyway. So it's really more of a 7-seater in name only. The battery pack in the concept is a 90 kilowatt hour battery pack, and they're claiming, or they're targeting more than 300 or a 500 kilometer range on the European drive cycle.
Right, it's like 300-ish miles, right?
Yeah, about 300 miles. And on the EPA cycle, which tends to be more closer to being realistic than the European cycle, that will they're projecting more than 220. From the conversations I had, it'll probably be somewhere in the range of 250 miles of range.
So we're getting there. The other thing that, well, I guess back up to platform-wise, is it based on because the XE shares a lot of platform stuff with the F-Pace, which also shares some platform stuff with the F-Type. That's smart. Is this an all-new platform, or are they taking bits and pieces?
They say it's an all-new platform. I'm sure that there are some common pieces, like things like steering gears, are probably shared with the other cars. maybe some of the suspension bits, but effectively this is an all new platform. It doesn't share a floor pan with any other Jaguar, just because of the nature of its structure. The bottom of the car is this battery pack, this big giant flat battery pack. So it really doesn't share anything. And when you look at it, you can see the design cues, the face of Jaguar, of a modern Jaguar, but the proportions are actually quite different from any other Jaguar that's out there today. Particularly the F-Pace. It's a shorter hood. They've stretched out the passenger compartment to the limits, because you don't have an engine up front. So they've maximized the passenger volume for the size of the vehicle. But it's taller like an F-Pace. So it's an interesting look. I think it's a good looking vehicle. It looks very sporting. It looks like it should be a Jaguar.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I think they're very smart to skip hybrids altogether, because they don't drive as well as a pure electric. Pure electrics are generally great to drive.
Well, they're not skipping hybrids altogether. I mean, they've got some hybrids in Land Rovers in Europe right now, and those will also be coming over in the next couple of years. So we'll probably see some hybrid models from JLR over the next few years as part of the overall strategy. But I think certainly for the Jaguar brand, they seem to be focusing more on the pure battery electric.
Yeah, and the other thing that stuck out to me was their claims kind of about charging. It's got a roughly 300-mile range, like we talked about, and then they're talking about 50 kilowatt DC charging. And that's a point. Like, I'm not sure everybody understands quite what that means. Like, electricity is still kind of an enigma. Charging it at that level of power will get you a full battery in 2 hours, and but maybe you can explain like what that kind of charger is. Like, that's not what you're going to have at home.
No, not at all. So what you get at home, you've got two types of charging you can have at home. They're both AC charging, alternating current. So you can have 110-volt charging. So you just plug it into a standard outlet, and that's usually about 1.5 kilowatts or so of power. So kilowatts is how we measure electrical power. So it's basically telling you how fast you're getting electrons into the battery. So a 110-volt charger is the slowest. And in an emergency, in a pinch, if you're visiting somewhere and you're running low and you need to get a little bit of extra juice in there, you can do that. Most home chargers that people who buy EVs are what are known as, and those 110 chargers are what are called level 1 chargers. Then you have level 2 chargers, which are 220 to 240 volt chargers, and the home chargers are usually either 6.6 or 7.2 kilowatts. They're starting to come out with some that are closer to 10 kilowatts, so those charge significantly faster. And then what this is DC charging. So this is similar to the Tesla superchargers, which are also DC chargers. And so these, you're doing the conversion outside the vehicle. So the energy, the electricity that's running through the grid is AC, alternating current, and batteries use DC, direct current. They don't, so in the vehicle we use AC motors, and there's an inverter that converts the DC from the battery into AC for the motor because that's more efficient. But you can charge the battery a lot faster if you pump DC into it instead of having to go through an onboard AC to DC converter.
Right, and so the thing is too, like 50 kilowatts, like that's the full power of an FM station is allowed to have. Like that is do some Ohm's law. That is a lot of power.
That's a lot of power. Actually, Tesla superchargers are even more powerful than that. Most of them are 100 kilowatts.
Well, that's right. I was going to say, actually, I made a mistake. 50 kilowatts that's a pretty big market station, but I think there's 100,000 watts. Like that's, and you do, what voltage is that at? Is that 480?
Or is that 480 volts, and then 100 amps usually.
That is a lot of juice. Yeah, that's not something you're going to find in your house at all.
The reason they spec this, in the press materials, they talked about 50 kilowatt charging is because most of the DC fast chargers that are out there today that aren't Tesla superchargers are 50 kilowatt chargers.
So it's not just Jaguar trying to get a number that looks palatable.
Yeah, I mean this is the standard. I mean, if you go out, there's actually a network of DC fast chargers that have been built on the East Coast and the West Coast, and across some corridors across the U.S. That use the standard SAE charging connector, combo charging connector, that everybody but Tesla uses. And so most of those that are out in the field now are 50 kilowatt chargers, and we're going to start seeing 100 kilowatt chargers coming out in the next couple of years. And I don't know if you remember the Porsche Mission E concept that they showed last year. That was actually they were using 200 kilowatt charging for that. And so, they've developed a 200 kilowatt DC charging system for that, which would go even faster. My guess is by the time the iPace goes into production in 2018, it will probably have support for at least 100 kilowatt charging and maybe 200 kilowatt charging.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting there, and we're building out the infrastructure. And the more of these vehicles that we get on the market, the more they're just going to be supported by charging infrastructure in different places. And I think that for Jaguar, they just come out with their first SUV crossover, whatever you want to call it, making that an EV, making that form factor an EV. That's such a smart move in terms of saleability, versus some, an XF or an XE that just doesn't have the appeal of the, useful, just the general overall, shape and size. Sedans are just not selling as much. So it's a very smart move, and at the same time, it almost feels anathema to Jaguar as well. Like Jaguars have always been about that racing heritage, and I know there's electric race series and stuff like that. It feels weird.
Into Formula E next year. So it's not compared to traditional Jaguar, it certainly is anathema, but this is the way everybody has to go now, and it's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful. I can't wait to actually drive one, because I mean it's going to be great. They're all going to every EV I drive. I like it because it doesn't have that weird powertrain handoff. It doesn't, you don't have to stop and fill it up, which is nice. You can plug it in. So as we just continue to see more of this stuff, like it's going to get better and better. I do wonder what it means for the future of internal combustion and gas engines, and whether fuel at a certain point demand tails off, and so fuel actually starts to creep up and be more expensive. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing, but we're gonna see some reckoning with you get a bunch of these things on the grid too. What does our grid do? These are all big picture questions, I understand. So
right, and that's where things like local solar charging can definitely help. You've got more and more people installing solar on their homes, so they're not relying on the grid for the energy to charge their EVs. And that's kind of the whole strategy behind Tesla buying Solar City, which they got approval for that deal this week. They want to have a complete vertical integration of being able to provide their customers with solar installations to power their electric vehicles, and just integrate everything together, and also provide home energy storage to store some of that excess solar that you get during the day and be able to use it at night when the sun is on the other side of the planet. And I think, I personally, from a business standpoint, I'm not convinced that combining Solar City and Tesla was necessarily a good idea. I mean, I think you can provide that sort of integration through partnerships, between different companies, but that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, that's business.
We don't need to get into that here.
But let's keep talking about Tesla, because one of the topics you shared was a German study that Tesla owners think Autopilot is actually better than it really is, it doesn't seem to be a surprise, because the average car buyer doesn't know a lot about how their car operates.
So this is a survey that Tesla commissioned among their German customers, following request from the German regulators for Tesla to stop using the term autopilot for.
Right, they call it autopilot, so. Like, what did you expect was going to happen?
Yeah. Well, the reality is that, people are familiar with the term autopilot, from aircraft, and they assume that autopilot means that it can fly the plane on its own. But the reality is that autopilot is not autonomous flying. Basically all autopilot does, it's pretty much akin to the cruise control that you have on your car today, that you set it at a certain speed and altitude and it just tries to maintain that. That's all that most autopilot in aircraft does.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the nautical idea would be like an auto helm, right? Yeah. Like it follows the course that you have plotted, but you still got to watch it. You don't want to run into the reef.
Exactly. So in response to the request from the German regulators, Tesla commissioned a survey of 675 of their owners in Germany. And they asked things like, have you ever used Autopilot? 99% said yes. Are you familiar with the warnings that Tesla provides about how Autopilot is to be properly used? 98% said yes. The very last question was the one that concerned me the most. Has the name Autopilot caused you to believe the car is fully autonomous, meaning it does not require the driver to be supervising the car? 7% of owners responded yes to that question. So that means 93% said no, so that they realize it's not fully autonomous. 7% said yes. So I did a little number crunching and compared that to the U.S. market, for example. And keep in mind that Tesla owners, because these the Model S and Model X are expensive cars, so these are more affluent customers that are going to tend in general to be better educated and more informed. And then Tesla owners as a whole are probably or German owners as a whole are going to be more inclined to be aware of what cars can and cannot do, just because the driver education system in Germany is much more stringent than it is here in the U.S. I mean, here basically, if you have a pulse and you know how to start the engine and occasionally hit the brake pedal, you can pretty much get a driver's license.
Right, you get a license.
Yeah. So 7% of German Tesla owners said they thought this thing was fully autonomous. Now, if you apply that, disregarding the other things, if you just apply that straight to the U.S. Driver population, from 2014, there were 214 million licensed drivers in the United States. 7% of that, and it's probably a lot higher if you ask, a representative population of American drivers. But
yeah, I mean, maybe how about we could just double
people.
It?
Yeah,
it's how many?
Well, it's 15 million people.
15 million people. So, and if we were to say, Americans, even affluent Americans, my totally unscientific sampling of people I know who fit the Tesla buyer mode actually know less about how anything works, other than like what they might have their PhD and they have trouble surviving otherwise. So
just for comparison, 15 million people. Assume 15 million American drivers think that the Tesla Autopilot is fully autonomous.
That's a lot of people.
In that same year, in 2014, there were 6 million accidents, car crashes.
Right, and so that's 2014. That's actually lower, right?
Yeah, it's gone up. I mean, that's the last year that we have the full numbers for posted in the FARS database, which is the Fatality Accident Reporting System that the Department of Transportation maintains. The 2015 numbers will probably be going in there pretty soon as they finish parsing everything. But for 2014, 6 million accidents. We have 15 million people, presumably, who think that it's fully autonomous. And everybody likes to throw out the statistic that 94% of accidents are caused by human error. But when you look at the fact that Americans in 2014 drove almost 3.1 trillion miles, 3.1 trillion with a T miles, and you only had 6 million accidents and 33,000 roughly fatalities that year. The reality is that the vast majority of time, drivers are not making errors that lead to accidents or fatalities. So yes, most of the accidents were caused by human error, but most of the time, the vast majority of the time, drivers were not making errors that led to accidents. So these are they seem kind of contradictory, but they're not. So it's only a very tiny proportion of all the driving that actually results in accidents.
Right. Well, the safest car is one that doesn't hit stuff, and I mean it's the reason why you can still you can go out and you can drive a car that was built in the 80s or the 70s or the 60s, and if you don't crash it, you're good.
Yeah.
Like,
So the thing to keep in mind is that yes, most Tesla drivers don't think it's autonomous, but there's enough that this could be a serious problem, if you applied this technology across the entire fleet without educating people. And that's the key of what I wrote in this Forbes article is we really need to educate drivers about what these systems really can and cannot do.
Right, like that's like there's a wetware problem, and it reminds me of, not that I was really there for it, but we're pushing the technology almost too far too fast into the mainstream, kind of like what happened when fuel injection started to be widely introduced or more widely introduced. Early systems weren't as robust and reliable as they eventually became, and service providers weren't properly trained, and so there was an understanding problem. There's multiple instances of like, oh, we introduced this car, like the 82 Imperial was introduced with fuel injection. System had issues, so the fix was to call it back and put carburetors on it. Like that's almost the point we're at here, where we've got the system. It's more refined than that, but like not everybody understands it yet, and there's still that inertia, and yet we continue to put this stuff out in the market.
Yeah, I mean, and the problem here is the consequences of, if fuel injection system fails, then car gets stranded. Okay, it's annoying, but it's generally not going to lead to an accident. But if these systems fail because the drivers were expecting them to do things that they're not capable of doing, then the potential consequences are much higher or much more serious. And so, the key to all this is making sure that we educate drivers. And that's one of the elements that was in the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration guidelines that they published a couple of months ago for autonomous vehicles, that manufacturers need to figure out how they're going to educate consumers about the technology. There's also the National Safety Council has a program called My Car Does What, where they're producing materials to try to educate drivers about driver assistance systems that are in the market today, what they can and can't do. And at MIT, Professor Brian Reamer is running the Advanced Vehicle Technology Consortium, where they're studying these technologies, and they've got a number of different vehicles. They've got a couple of Teslas, a couple of Volvos with pilot assist, and some Land Rover Evokes with various driver assist systems. And they've got them all instrumented and with cameras, and they're looking at and having drivers go out and drive these things and looking at how they're responding to these various technologies to try and figure out how can we better design the interfaces, the human machine interface, to inform the drivers about what's going on. How do we keep them engaged, and how do we manage these systems to deal with that human element?
Yeah, and like for me, I don't want the human element to be removed from it. And that's one possible solution is, at a certain point, let's take the human stuff out of it. And there's I'm on the side of the debate where, driving is the most complex thing I do on a daily basis. Like, I actually enjoy the engagement of it. I'm not buying the promise of like, oh, sit there and read the paper. Or the more cynical side of me says, well, sit there and consume media in some way. Watch crap on your phone, and so we can serve you advertising. Enough. Like, I want to drive. When I'm driving, even if I'm in a traffic jam, I want to drive. And, that's against, like, completely opposite of the one of the more elegant solutions of, fixing the human problem with driving is like just remove the humans.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not, particularly fond of driving in heavy traffic, so I,
nobody is.
Scenarios, I would just as soon hand it over if I knew I had a reliable system that could deal with it. And that's why when I've got a vehicle that has adaptive cruise control, if I'm in traffic, I will use that in traffic. But I also make sure that I monitor it closely.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, you pay attention still.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not the typical driver. I mean, as someone who's an engineer by training and an analyst by trade today, and studying these technologies, I'm far more aware than the typical consumer of what the capabilities of these vehicles are and their limitations. So other people that don't have that knowledge they need to be made aware of what these vehicles are really capable of, and I don't think it helps to use terminology that implies that there's some capability there that it's not, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, it's a great marketing term for sure. Calling it autopilot, everybody understands that car drives itself to some degree. That's nice
under very specific circumstances.
Right. And
There's
that's
a lot of circumstances where it can't drive itself.
That's kind of the issue. And a lot of places in the country where you can start off just fine, but run into trouble. I'm thinking about autonomous cruise and that stuff. Once those sensors up front ice up, you get a lot of cars, you get no cruise.
Yeah.
Because it knows that it can't detect anything in front of it. And, some cars like Toyotas, a lot of Toyotas will allow you to switch between the autonomous cruise and the more normal, like just speed-based cruise, and some Chryslers do as well.
Yeah, most cars do that.
But there are some that don't. I've had, and that's
I've been in that situation. Driving the morning after a snowfall, in morning rush hour traffic that was going varying speeds, and using the adaptive cruise control, and it was working great and for about 15 minutes, and then after that the radar sensor on the front of the car was just covered up with slush, and it threw up a warning saying, disabling the adaptive cruise control, please stop and clean off the radar sensor.
Yeah, well, and also that's right, and that's your emergency braking, and your all of that stuff is driven off that sensor. So
and that's a fundamental problem with what Tesla has done with their second generation Autopilot. They've added, they've gone from 1 camera to 8 cameras around the car, and they've got the ultrasonic sensors in the radar, but there's no mechanism on there to actually keep those sensors clean. And so if you're driving in those kinds of conditions, that will after a few minutes, those sensors are going to be blind. And so that system will never, no matter what Elon Musk says, the second generation Autopilot can never be a level 5 autonomous system that is capable of autonomous driving under all conditions, because they have no means to keep those sensors clean.
Yeah, well, and I mean, sensor-based stuff can only do so much. The real solution there is likely to be something that combines the sensors with V2V and V2I and just all of those different technologies, and that's going to take a while. So all these predictions of autonomous full, self-driving cars in 2-3 years, I think they're kind of full of crap.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're going to see some limited deployments of those, of level 4 autonomous vehicles in places where the conditions allow it in the early 2020s. But, it's going to be at least the late 2020s and beyond before you start to see them, much more widely available. And even some folks from Silicon Valley that I talked to this week in LA, agreed with that. They're starting to get a much more realistic view of when these systems will really be capable of being available more broadly.
I mean, I love what the hubris has done, though. It's certainly moved the industry along. It's also interesting to watch them sort of make that shift. Like, oh, this is a lot harder than we thought. The automakers aren't complete idiots.
The threshold for a minimally viable product in cars is a lot different than it is when you're making a photo app.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get back to enthusiast cars, though, too. Let's wrap up with the Mazda CX-5 finally gets a diesel, which, I mean, I love Mazda for how out of step with convention they are. I mean, they pay attention to pleasing drivers, and this is sort of just another level of that. Like, they're bringing a diesel to market in the U.S. now.
Yeah. It's interesting. Mazda has been trying to bring a diesel to the U.S. market for several years, and you'd probably be surprised to learn that actually right now in Japan, a market that has not traditionally been known as a strong diesel market, 70% of Mazda's sales in the Japanese domestic market are now diesel powered.
Yeah, how do they explain that?
Because they're one of the only brands that does it, and they're able to get really good fuel economy with their diesels. So they've got a relatively unique proposition in the Japanese market. So they've had some success there with that, and they've been trying to bring it here, and they've been running into some of the same issues that other manufacturers have with trying to meet U.S. emission standards without doing anything inappropriate, let's say, or violating any laws.
Right.
I mean, they initially promised the diesel about 3 years ago in the current generation CX-5 and also in the Mazda 6, and they've delayed it several times now. For the time being, they have shelved plans to put the diesel, their 2.2 liter 4-cylinder diesel, into the 6, but they are going to be putting it into the new generation, the second generation CX-5, from in the second half of 2017. They've shifted their strategy. Originally, they were trying to do it with a NOx trap, similar to what Volkswagen was doing. They're now using a urea injection system, a selective catalytic reduction system, similar to what pretty much everyone else is doing for the CX-5. And the explanation I got from Mazda officials this week was that the CX-5 is a crossover. It's more of a lifestyle vehicle. The diesel is a good fit for that type of vehicle, where people are looking for good drivability, lots of torque, and also trying to get better fuel efficiency. And actually, they're not the only ones in that segment, bringing out a diesel in that mainstream compact crossover segment. A few weeks back, GM announced that they're putting a diesel in the redesigned 2018 Equinox as well. So both of these crossovers, these compact crossovers, are coming to market around the same time next year, and they will each have diesel engines. So it's going to be real interesting to watch how those are accepted in the marketplace.
Yeah, well, it's going to be difficult for them. I mean, Volkswagen has managed to tarnish the reputation of diesel. Diesel's going to cost a bit more, and it's pretty well under fire, not necessarily just because of Volkswagen either. Pickups and large trucks haven't been all rainbows and unicorns with diesel either. There's lots of expensive issues with DEF and particulate traps and SCR. Like the regen can burn stuff up sometimes, and they're not cheap to fix, and they're not as dead nuts reliable as diesels once were.
Right. I mean, they've definitely gotten more complex than they used to be, and that makes it tougher to maintain that level of reliability and durability. Although diesel truck buyers really love them. For trucks, they're a great application for trucks, and I'm sure we've all seen the spy photos of upcoming F-150s with diesel engines in them. Ford has yet to announce it. We may see an announcement at the Detroit Auto Show in January that the 2018 F-150s will have an optional 3-liter diesel V6, which is the same engine that's currently used by Land Rover in the Range Rover, and also I think Jag. They offer it in the XJ, maybe, or maybe it's just in the Range Rovers. But it's an engine that's actually built by Ford. And used by Land Rover, and that engine will be going into the 2018 F-150.
How necessary is that? Like, when you get that kind of engine in a half-ton pickup, like.
I think they've pretty much maxed out what they can get with their EcoBoost engines in terms of fuel economy, and if they want to keep pumping that up in order to meet new fuel economy standards, new CAFE standards.
Well, I don't think they need to worry about that anymore, do you?
Well, I mean, for now at least, it is they've got a plan as if still going to be in place. So anything can happen there. In all likelihood, it will get rolled back. But even if it gets rolled back to some degree or slowed down, they do still have to keep increasing the fuel economy. And so, that's one approach they can take. They're also developing hybrid systems for the trucks. So, we'll see a number of different solutions. And same thing at Mazda. We're going to start seeing electrified Mazdas in the coming years as well, between now and 2020. So everybody's looking at all possible solutions to the problem.
Yeah, well, and if there's one vehicle that could actually use the extra torque, I feel like it's the CX-5. Like, it's such a good vehicle to drive, and especially with the 2-liter and the manual transmission. Like, it's so much fun, but you still feel like it's got okay horsepower when you get on it and let it wind up the tack. But the off-the-line torque is not I don't think it's what most people are accustomed to.
Right, and that's exactly why Mazda is doing the diesel in that particular vehicle first, because it's a good fit for that type of vehicle.
Yeah, and they could get around it too with just a turbocharged gas 4-cylinder, but again, economy's going to take a hit. So it makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure it's going to be delightful. So we'll hold our breath until it gets here, and we'll drive it and see what it's like. There was one quote from Mazda that was funny though, where their guy said, Mazdas are not commodities and never will be, except for their kind of actual commodity goods because they're an automobile. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, what he was getting at there is that they don't want Mazdas to be seen as just completely interchangeable with any other vehicle in the segment. They want consumers to see them as something a little bit special, based on the design, their driving dynamics, their interior appointments. So they're trying to make them feel a little more premium than the competitors, while still providing good value.
Yeah, I think they definitely do that, for sure. They're our darling as auto writers, and hopefully everybody else actually listens to us and goes and checks out Mazda so that they are continuing their success, because they're an independent automaker now, and it's difficult in this.
They're no longer under the umbrella of one of the big guys. Ford divested their stake in Mazda back in 2008 or 2009. And so they're on their own, and they're doing some really impressive work, from the MX-5 Miata all the way up to the new CX-9, which we'll talk about next week. There's a lot to like there.
All right. Well, so we've teed up next week. We've gotten, we talked about infotainment. We talk about the CX-9. We haven't had any questions at our wheelbearingscast@gmail.com email, but we've gotten some feedback on iTunes.
We did get one, didn't we?
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
And we'll put this one in next week because we had a lot to talk about this week. But we did get an email earlier today actually about visibility, and we'll put that in the queue for next week. And if anybody else has any comments or questions that you'd like us to address, or topics, you can reach us at wheelbearingscast@gmail.com. You can also use the form on the website at Wheelbearings Media, where you can find the podcast, and also links to where you can subscribe using iTunes or Google Play or Pocket Casts or TuneIn Radio. And if you happen to use iTunes in particular, feel free to go in and give us a rating, review if you like the show.
Yeah, I do want to point out, because we did get a couple of ratings, and thank you very much for that. I do want to point out how instrumental you were in setting it all up, because people have said, "Oh, great job, Dan." Thank you. But Sam did all the hard work, so
yeah, you do all the editing and actually putting the file together. So
we've balanced off the workload, but it's very much a joint effort. And we're gonna go, but we're gonna play the interview with the guy,
Ali Vahabzadeh,
right,
who is the CEO of Chariot, which if you've been in the San Francisco area in the last year or so, you've probably seen these blue Ford Transit vans running around, especially around downtown San Francisco. They're called Chariots, and you can, if you listen to the interview with Ali, Chariot was just purchased by Ford's Smart Mobility division a little more than a month ago, and I had a chance to sit down with Ali this week in Los Angeles and learn all about what Chariot is, what their strategy is, what they're trying to do. So give it a listen. I think you'll find it informative, and hopefully if you're in one of the areas, they're now in Austin as well, Austin, Texas.
Of course they're in Austin.
Let us know what you think of the service.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, if you're in that area, please let us know what it's like. So all right, well, good. We'll go. This is episode 3. So excellent, and we'll see everybody for episode 4. And enjoy the interview.
All right, bye. Starting with Chariot, recently purchased by Ford. You started it a couple of years ago in San Francisco. Tell me a little bit. What is Chariot? What's the company doing?
Sure. So Chariot is a network of crowdsourced commuter routes, which are fast, reliable, comfortable, and affordable way to get from your residential neighborhood to work districts. And we started in 2014 in San Francisco, and we've recently expanded to our second market, Austin, Texas. And so we're using 14-passenger vans to commute people and during commuter hours, 6 to 10 in the morning, 4 to 8 p.m. In the evenings. And these are typically $4 rides where our customers are also able to use their commuter benefits to purchase their passes with pre-tax dollars. By crowdsourcing, I mean our customers, our future customers, come on to our website or download our app. They provide us their commute from and commute to address, usually their home and work address. And based on collecting thousands of these data points a day, we're essentially having a popularity contest of where Chariot is going to launch its next routes. And so it's a very novel, innovative way of having the public tell us where they need more commuting capacity. And so we're never sitting around a table and wondering where we should launch our next route. Our future users are telling us directly.
Yeah, so at its core, it's much like a transit bus service, a traditional transit bus service, and mixed with kind of a jitney service. And you mentioned the dollar vans in New York and other similar kinds of services in other places around the world, and then layering on top of that, harnessing technology to increase the flexibility and make it more useful, more practical for riders, and also help with your business as well at the same time. Can you talk a little bit more about that layering and how you're harnessing the technology to make transit more practical for consumers?
Sure. So at its base, we are asking people again, hey, where do you want to get picked up and where do you want to get dropped off? And by using that data, our algorithm creates a route, and it actually produces pickup and drop-off stops. And we typically have about 2/3 less stops than a comparable bus route. And by that, as a consequence of that, our routes are typically 50% faster than a comparable public mass transit route. And so we're able to crowdsource not just where people want to go from and to, but really what the shape of that route is, where are the stops. So that's one application of technology. The second application of technology is people are downloading our app and are able to reserve a seat on a particular Chariot. And our Chariots in the morning and in the evening, you open up the app and you tell us where you're going from and going to, and we have your preferences already in there. And we provide you a live menu of Chariots available to book based on ETA. And most of the time there's availability on the Chariot to book a seat, and then you proceed to the pickup stop and you wait for the Chariot to arrive, and you have live tracking on the app so that you can see where the vehicle is, and you also get to know who your driver is for that morning. And once you jump on, and once the Chariot arrives, the app turns into basically a boarding pass, which you show to the driver. And the driver has an iPad facing them with the same trip code, so matching trip code on the boarding pass and on the iPad, and you're on your way. And as you're on your way, you get an ETA to your destination. And as you approach your drop-off stop, the app actually push notifies you that, hey, Sam, we're about to get close to the Los Angeles Convention Center. It's time. Your stop is next. And so right then and there, you have a transit experience that is fast, affordable, convenient, and really forward-looking. And we expect Chariot to be the mode of transit for commuters for a long time coming.
Yeah, obviously, you have the convenience of the smartphone integration, so you don't have to fumble for exact change. You're getting on a bus or trying to find your transit pass or whatever you might be using. You always know you have a seat. Yep. And it's always going to be clean. So there's a lot of advantages to that, and it seems like as part of a larger multimodal mobility ecosystem, it makes a lot of sense to be one of those components within that system.
For sure. So a lot of some of our customers actually bike to the Chariot stop, and some of our Chariots have bike racks, so you could throw your bike on there and use Chariot to commute downtown. 1 in 5 of our customers are taking the service to get to a transit hub, like a train or a ferry or a bus terminal. So they're actually using Chariot as a first and last mile solution. Those same people, when we survey them, would have previously were actually driving for both their first mile and the trunk line, because there were probably no reliable or frequent ways to get to that trunk line. So we're really proud that not only have we created a service that fulfills a lot of people's commutes, it's actually, for at least 20% of our customers, is feeding the public mass transit system customers, which they may not have had in the past.
Right. Yeah.
And the triple win there is that we're taking cars off the street.
Yeah.
So these are 14 passenger Ford Transit wagons. So theoretically, we could be taking 14 cars off the street with each one of these Chariots.
Yeah, you've got more density of passengers, within a given amount of space on the road, because obviously one of the inherent issues with congestion, in an existing city, you can't continue to expand the road infrastructure. Yeah. But if you've got more people living in the city, somehow you have to figure out a way to accommodate them. And so services like this as part of this larger ecosystem seem to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just at a venue in the Bay Area, and they have a 1-year exclusive with a ride-sharing company that uses passenger cars. A lot of fans of this venue use the ride-sharing service to get to the venue for game time. But the venue operator really doesn't like how the service is playing out and is not going to be extending that arrangement, because it just creates another type of havoc where the loading zones are, one driver for one passenger. That's really not solving any issues. When you have a larger factor vehicle like the 14-passenger van, you really do begin to make a dent into taking cars off the street and beginning to maximize efficiency. It's also, of course, it's not as big as a 60-person bus, but the neat thing about the 14-passenger van is that it doesn't take up too much space. It doesn't need red curb loading zones where
it gives you a degree of flexibility.
It does,
especially for routes where you don't have enough density, enough passenger density to fill, a 40-foot or a 60-foot bus. Something.
Yeah,
like
and we don't have to use bus stops of the municipality, which is always a sensitive issue. And we're not creating a ton of noise and pollution in residential neighborhoods, which we go through. It's just like driving a car through the neighborhood, as opposed to big coach buses. So the aesthetic is really pleasing as well.
And talk a little bit about serving transit deserts, as you called them previously.
Yeah, I'll give you an example which we're really proud of, because it served a community and a set of users that weren't typical Chariot customers, and that is the hospitality community up in the Fisherman's Wharf district of San Francisco. They rely very heavily on hourly workers coming from far outside the city, and they're taking and these workers are typically taking these workers are typically taking commuter rail from far outside the city to get into the city. But once they get to downtown San Francisco, they had no way of getting up to Fisherman's Wharf, which is clearly a transit desert for whatever reason. Certainly predates us being there. the business owners of the fishermen of Pier 39 and Alcatraz and those Ghirardelli Square and those businesses got together and crowdsourced the Chariot route. And they got their employees to sign up. And not only did they sign up, they actually subsidized the Chariot service from downtown San Francisco to Fisherman's Wharf as this last mile solution. And that's an awesome example of the business community coming together, addressing a very big need of their employees, subsidizing them, and also helping create a public good for other people who don't work there. On top of that, a lot of these hourly workers didn't have smartphones, and they didn't have or data plans on their smartphones. So we had to hack together an interesting paper-based or non-digital solution for those workers so that they could be reliable riders for us. So, in that one episode, we did a couple of cool things there that we expect to do a lot more of in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we've all heard about, some of the big tech companies further down the Bay Peninsula, that have fleets of buses, that go up to San Francisco and transport their employees, to places like Mountain View and Cupertino and Sunnyvale and elsewhere. And there's been complaints from people in the city about those buses. But obviously, for smaller businesses, in some places in San Francisco and in every other city, it can be very beneficial to them to have a solution that helps their employees get to work on time economically. Yep. But they don't have the scale to do something like a big bus.
So we have an enterprise product that we launched several months ago. As a result of our B2C product, our customers walking into their offices in the morning and approaching their HR or benefits or perks people and saying, hey, forget the yoga class. I take this thing called Chariot twice a day, 4 or 5 times a week, because it's an optimal solution for my commute. I'm happy with it. Is there any way the company can subsidize it? So we started receiving a bunch of inbound requests from companies asking how they can pay for Chariot on behalf of their employees or create these custom routes. So very quickly we became this Google bus alternative for the other 99% of the companies that are not called Google, Facebook, and Apple, but wanted to provide this type of perk for their employees. And make no mistake, this isn't out of the generosity of a lot of their hearts. They're very good people, but there are 3 core reasons why companies are using a Chariot solution for their employees. Number 1 is retention. Number 2 is recruiting. So, you're a company and you've outgrown your San Francisco office or your urban office, and now you got to go to the suburbs and relocate to a big office park because it's more cost efficient. You've got to figure out a way to recruit people, especially young people from the city, to come to those office parks, especially when they don't own a car. And then you got to figure out how to retain them. And the third thing is productivity. So you're probably not very productive driving in bumper-to-bumper traffic on the 101 at 7:30 in the morning. Our enterprise Chariots have Wi-Fi on board. They have bike racks so you can bike to the stop. And people get a lot of work done on these things. And that makes employers very happy. And so all of a sudden, instead of wasting 2 to 3 hours of your day, you're actually putting it to good use and either working online or having a much more pleasurable experience than sitting in back-to-back bumper-to-bumper traffic.
Yeah, and now that you're part of the Ford family of businesses, Ford has been developing their dynamic shuttle service around the Dearborn area for a while now for their campus there to get employees around, and they're using transit vans with Wi-Fi and power. Are you and the folks behind the dynamic shuttle working together, sharing ideas, and building on the technology from both sides, and also based on what they're doing, what they've been doing, and you've already added your enterprise service. Are you looking at other tiers of service, maybe for a more premium ride for certain types of applications, things like that?
Yeah, so they've, Ford and the folks in Dearborn have been working on this problem for a while, and so they certainly have a set of technology which we have begun to take a look at and understand how we can phase it into our business. We have another set of technology as well, which we're continuing to use. So it's all additive, and it's all exciting that we've actually been purchased by a company that can not only provide us vehicles, but also they know what the problem set is because they've tackled it over the last few years. And then your other point was
just about offering different tiers of service for different applications.
So beyond enterprise, something that has been very popular with Chariot is beyond the commuting use case is now events and charters. So people are using Chariot to now go on weekend excursions, go to the beach, go to the ball game, go to the concert, go to the festival. And that also makes us proud because we know we're taking potentially drunk drivers off the road. And we're creating this experience on this 14-passenger van where there's group travel and small to medium-sized groups of people and friends and family can really enjoy the service now 7 days a week. And that's actually become 30% of our business. So, we think that events, and we're going to soon rebrand it as another name and have a whole nother set of experiences on the Chariot app, is going to be a really important driver for us, especially because sometimes a new Chariot user's first experience is not with the commuter product, but it's actually over the weekend because their friend is the commuter. She organizes a Chariot over the weekend and invites a bunch of her friends who have never rode Chariot, and then guess what? Monday morning they start riding it for their commute. So it's also very good business in that we're cross-selling our services. I think there are a number of future use cases which we'll begin to address in 2017. Different groups of people that could be using Chariot. I won't name them now because we're still in product development, but at the end of the day, it's driving utilization. There's 24 hours in a day, and trying to figure out how to use that vehicle as much as possible, and as in use cases which are safe, environmentally friendly, and are actually furthering the Chariot brand.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. That was going to be my next question about utilization. Different. Cause obviously, for commuters tend to, have peak periods of use in a couple of different times of the day. How are you handling that? In terms of deploying your vehicles during peak times versus off-peak times. How are you using the vehicles, and also have you looked, particularly for your enterprise customers, have you talked to the enterprise customers about staggering their work hours, to work with them to schedule their work hours so that everybody can get better utilization of the service for maybe a lower cost?
Yeah, interesting. I think they're thinking about that on their own so as to minimize the pain of commuting hours. Chariot, the enterprise product, is very comfortable, but at the end of the day, it's physics, and you're still on the road. And if there's traffic, there's traffic. We can't fly yet. To address the peaks and troughs,
that's in 2017.
Yeah. To address the peaks and troughs, that's why we are continuing to develop products. So as to address, filling up that plane, filling up that hotel. We have some similarities with those other industries. It's a utilization and an occupancy game. And I think what you'll see in our next few products is we're going to be leveling out the demand curve. So instead of peaks and troughs, you have a constant level
More
of high
consistent use.
utilization.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. And one last thing: how many vehicles do you have in operation now, and drivers? And you're in 2 cities right now.
Yeah, so we're in San Francisco and Austin, Texas. We have 120 vehicles on the road, and we expect to be in another 5 cities in the next 12 months, with several hundred more vehicles deployed across the country.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ollie.
Thanks, Sam.
Great conversation.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.